chance to play with some incredible people in the Android Netrunner, rest in peace, and Magic the Gathering communities. But it's time to clean off the rose-tinted glasses and use what I've learned from the other games to dive into competitive YuGiOh. Welcome back to episode 9 of Diving into YuGiOh. We covered our decklist changes at the end of last episode, and we've got locals in like half an hour, so let's just dive straight into that. We've got 4 rounds of locals again this week. There's less players than usual, but a high density of the more competitive focused players, so should be a pretty fun week. For round 1, we get our bye for the week immediately out of the way, getting to spectate Salamangreat vs Ogdoadic. Seems every YouTuber is cursed to have to try and pronounce that name at least once. Unfortunately, the snakes seem to give your opponent quite a bit of advantage if they go second, allowing them to recur their graveyard while you do your combo, and all that just to be basically another Dragoon deck. It's probably not something worth picking up right now, but it's full of the kind of insane graveyard interactions that takes one busted card to push it to being broken, so maybe I'll end up eating my words. Our first actual match of the night is against Dragon Link. I enjoy this matchup, but it is a little reliant on either going first or drawing Nibiru, draw, or Gamma, as we really don't have a good way of breaking boards through negates. That said, game 1, we're going first, and passing with a face down Wendy, Torrential Tribute, and Dogmatica Punishment. Quite a bit of interaction. We Torrential once our opponent exhausts their guard dragons and brings out Levianeer. In hindsight, I should have also chained the punishment that Levianeer now gets to pop, so I could have sent App Cologne to get another Shaddolls in the graveyard, so that's lesson number 1 of the day. We bring out Squamata and our opponent continues on to make Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, which is a quick effect negate. We flip Squamata to force the negate and swing into Spheres to force the bounce, chaining Gamma to the summon effect from Spheres. Summoning Driver from our hand, because of course it's in our hand. We normal summon Squamata and make Unicorn to return Hot Red to the extra deck. We at least managed to out their board, but now I'm down to just a Unicorn against 4 cards in hand from Dragon Link. So the game basically goes as expected with here, with our opponent using Quad Borrow to revive 3 rockets by popping Unicorn, and with Levianeer in hand, that's another Borrow Sword Levianeer win for our opponent. Game 2, we open a little bricky. We pass with only a Sinister Shadow Games and a Super Poly face down. I opt to use the Shadow Games in standby phase to try and get the material for a Super Poly into Winder, which unfortunately triggers Super Poly to eat a Cosmic Cyclone. Maybe just praying for our opponent to play Double Darks and go into Starving Venom was the correct play here. I'm honestly not too sure. Continuing on, we Gamma Levianeer when it tries to rip a card out of our hand and leads our opponent to pass on Spheres, Savage, Striker, and Pisty. We play a face-down monster and 2 back row and pass right back. Tidying bounces our punishment and their Pisty. Levianeer comes out, to which we chain Rush Shaddoll Incarnation targeting Hedgehog, which eats the Savage negate. Squamata gets sent to graveyard by Levianeer, so we trigger its effect, only to get ashed. With nothing on board and our opponent having the material for Borrow Sword, that's another Borrow Sword win. These felt a lot more one-sided than last week. Both games we just lacked enough interaction to get into a grind state, and we were completely lacking fusion spells to force our opponent to deal with Winder. Unicorn got us out of 1 gem in game 1, but it cost so many resources to use it that we just had no follow-up. It feels like a break glass in case of emergency kind of card, to be honest. Round 3, we're up against Guru Control, and in this series I finally learned that Subterrors are not dark. They are Earth, which actually makes our Super Polys basically completely dead now that we have no Muddragon or Shekinaga in the extra deck. Game 1, we both open with a bunch of face downs, resulting in our opponent having 5 back row to our monster and 2 back row. We flip up Squamata to see if they have any monster removal and swing for 1800. Our opponent sets a monster, which I assume is a Guru, so I tribute for Beast and swing into it. Our opponent activates Final Battle during the damage step, so we can't respond to that. And we mix up timing here, thinking that Guru's flip effect activates before damage calc, so Final Battle is a chain to it. It doesn't matter here, but this isn't actually the case. Flip effects activate after damage calculation, and in the end we take 1200 damage. We then go into a bit of a back row fight over Guru. with Punishment being stopped by Fiendess, and Dynamiscus just happened to be in the same row as an Imperm. It's this point when I realised that our super polys are dead, so with only one of those face down, we get beaten up by Guru and Behemoth for game. Game 2, we go first and pass with a face down Wendy in a back row, hashing Extravagance just for our opponent to draw 2 with triple tactics talent anyway. They then set 5 back row and pass. On our turn, we flip up the Wendy, to which Gozen Match gets chained, so we can only summon another Wendy from deck. Unfortunately, we basically have no other wind monsters, so we're now stuck with these 2 instead of being able to go into our extra deck. So we just attack with the attack position Wendy and pass turn. It's at this point going over the games that I realised that Wendy's effects are both restricted from summoning Wendy from deck, not just the graveyard one. So, accidental misplay. Oops. On our opponent's turn, they use Fiendess and Final Battle to attack into the defense position Wendy. In the end step, we attempt to Rush Shaddolls Incarnation Wendy back from the grave, which gets solemned. On our turn, we go to battle and try and knock out Fiendess and run straight into Dogmatica Punishment. This actually kind of works out in our favour as we're now free of the Windlock, so we bring out Squamata and attempt to flip it face up with Resh Engrave, which also gets solemned. Since we can't use a face down for a link summon, we just pass with a back row. Fiendess plus Final Battle is able to attack over Squamata, but it pops Fiendess in the process. In their end step, we use Dynamiscus to banish Gozen Match, discarding Dragon to pop their newly set Punishment. With our opponent down to only 16-25, we normal summon Wendy and attack twice over a couple of turns for game. For game 3, our opponent goes first and passes with 4 face downs, one of which is a Solemn Strike which stops our summon of Construct. However, that lets us add back the Shaddolls Fusion for next turn, as well as summon a Beast with Wendy. We play 2 face downs of our own and pass back. Our opponent adds another back row to their collection and passes back to us. In their end step, we roll a dice with Cyclone to knock out a Solemn Judgment. On our turn, we flip up Beast, drawing and discarding a duplicate Shaddolls Fusion. In the battle phase, Beast eats a Dogmatica Punishment, so we play 2 more face downs and pass back. They then set another card, and in the end of their main phase we activate Schism to summon a Construct, which gets Crackdowned. Construct sends Squamata, who sends Dragon to destroy the newly set back row, which is a Final Battle. Back to us, we special summon a Pancratops, which convinces our opponent to activate Gozen Match, so we chain Pancratops' effect to destroy Construct, not wanting to get locked into Earths, and we add back the Shaddolls Fusion to hand. Using our Shaddolls Fusion, we bring out App Cologne, using Aerial and Squamata, banishing 3 cards from our opponent's graveyard, including their fusion that can pop a monster in their turn by banishing itself. App Cologne negates Gozen Match, and Squamata dumps Wendy to summon Hedgehog. Schism banishes a Construct and Aerial to bring out another Construct, sending Resh to grave. Resh flips Hedgehog to add El Shaddolls Fusion to hand. And it actually looks like by rushing I grabbed Shaddolls Fusion by mistake, which is once per turn, but El Shaddolls Fusion was what I said out loud. Even adding Shaddolls Fusion, I had game secured as time was about to be called and we were significantly ahead on life points. But this is a reminder to, even if time is making you rush, stay calm, speak clearly, and handle your cards correctly. Had this not gone to time and they had a nut draw, then this could have been a completely different outcome. And for round 4, we go up against someone who I've yet to play against despite them being at every locals. And that's because they're always at the top of the tables. So finally we've done well enough to pair up against them. Their deck of choice is Dogmatica Invoked Shaddoll, which is basically the more expensive and explosive version of our deck. Game 1, they go first and normal summon Alistair. They go through some Link 1s and bring out Mechaba. They then activate Nadir's Servant, sending App Cologne and adding Maximus to hand, special summoning Ecclesia to add Punishment to hand. Finally, special summon Maximus and use effect, so we both send 2 extra deck monsters to the grave, us sending Entus and App Cologne. Entus targets Mechaba with App Cologne chain blocking. Mechaba pitches the Alistair to negate App Cologne but gets popped by the Entus. On our turn, we normal summon Dragon, causing our opponent to flip Schism and bring out Winder, sending Dragon to graveyard, who then pops their Ice Dragon's Prison. Next up, we super poly the Winder and the Ecclesia to bring out Construct, sending Schism to our graveyard. Go to battle phase and Fleur-de-Lis drops down to negate our Construct, so we attack over it instead of Maximus. Main phase 2, Construct links into Gravity Controller to add the Schism back to our hand. We set 2 face downs and pass turn. In response to their draw for turn, we flip Dynamiscus, banishing Schism and discarding Squamata, who sends Wendy to summon Beast. They hard draw Invocation and go into Agoutis, I think, targeting Gravity Controller with the pop effect. We chain Schism and bring out Construct, sending Agoutis to grave. Construct sends Aerial from deck to grave, banishing a bunch of light targets from our opponent's graveyard. A quick note here, it turns out my opponent accidentally added back Alistair to hand instead of banishing it when they played Invocation. However, they could have used the Invocation grave to add back the banished Alistair anyway since I didn't banish Invocation with Aerial, so I don't think this actually mattered, but please try to keep an eye on game state because this could have been huge if I had actually played correctly and banished the Invocation. Continuing on, normal summon Alistair and Invocation out a Raijin. They then flip Dogmatica Punishment targeting Construct. We use our Resh Engrave, banishing itself and another Shaddolls to flip Construct face down, so Punishment has no valid targets. They then activate Maximus, allowing us to send Cologne and Winder. Though Winder was definitely a mistake here since I don't have anything to add back to hand from the graveyard. Cologne sends Falco, who special summons itself, and their Entis destroys our Construct. In battle, Raijin attacks over Beast, allowing us to draw 2, and discarding Hedgehog to add Squamata to hand. They special summon Ecclesia in their end phase using Titaniclad and add Fleur de Lis to hand. On our turn, we use Schism to bring out the final Construct, sending Maximus to the grave. We send a Resh to the grave with Construct, and flip summon Falco lets us special summon Squamata face down, so we use the Resh to flip it up and pop the Raijin, who then books our Construct face down as a response. We then normal summon another Squamata to attack over Ecclesia and get in with Falco for the first damage of the game. We then set 2 back row and pass turn. Our opponent sets a card and passes to us. We link into Crotch Sheep to get to Borrow Sword and put Squamata in attack position. As we go to battle phase, we get Super Polyed for Starving Venom. I can't remember why I didn't flip summon the Construct here, but I have a Shaddolls name already if I was afraid of a Winder Super Poly, so it was a bit pointless. We then use Sinister Shadow Games to send Aerial and flip up Construct, me thinking that it allowed me to put it in attack position. Aerial banishes both Invocations and Fleur de Lis. We pass to our opponent who top decks Terraforming to get to Magical Meltdown to add Alistair to hand. They then realise they're out of Invocations, so they just attack into Construct with Starving Venom, destroying both of them and scoop it up. Game 2, our opponent goes first and starts off with normal summon Alistair, so we Ash. This leads them to pass with Secure Gardener and 4 face downs. We set a monster and 2 face downs of our own before passing back, for our opponent to open up with Magical Meltdown, which we attempt to Cyclone, but we're met with a Solemn Judgment. This means we can't even follow up with Dynamiscus thanks to spell speeds. We draw when they add Alistair to hand, causing them to pass. In their end step, we Dynamiscus the Meltdown, discarding Aerial to banish their graveyard. On our turn, we flip summon Squamata to pop the Secure Gardener and get in for 1800 damage. We then play a card face down and pass turn, with our face down eating a Cyclone. Looking back at this and how low our opponent is, I think Dynamiscusing the Meltdown was mostly out of fear. If I had waited for Alistair to be summoned the following turn, I could have used the Aerial to threaten the board even more this turn. Our next draw is another punishment which also eats a Cyclone. A couple of Invocations and a Super Poly later, we're at 100 while our opponent is at 200. We top deck Core, but they get out Agoutis, which pops it when we summon it. Had we played this a little differently, we could have come to a different outcome. However, playing under Meltdown would have meant needing to prevent our opponent ever getting a single fusion off, and if they had just Cycloned Dynamiscus before summoning Alistair, the game would have gone the exact same way. So many lines to think about, but ultimately it feels like a lot of the control was with our opponent this game. And finally, Game 3. With only a few minutes on the clock, we set a monster and 3 back row and pass. And the deciding moment of the match is our opponent activating Magical Meltdown. If we destroy it with Cyclone, all our opponent has to do is spend a few minutes building a board and we lose. But our line to victory in this short time frame definitely doesn't involve them invocating out a Mechaba. So we chain the Cyclone. Naturally, the next play is normal summon Alistair. Of course they already had it. Going into Purgatrio and Secure Gardener. We Schism to bring out Construct and send the Gardener to grave. time gets called before the end of their turn, and it turns out the Cosmic Cyclone does indeed bite us again. Purgatrio will get destroyed by Construct, and with our Dragon in hand, we could have swung the life point difference with a single battle phase. Honestly, that last game came down to us not knowing exactly how long was left. I thought we had a few more minutes than we actually did, which would have been more than enough to normal summon and go battle phase. Unfortunately, our locals doesn't use an online clock to track round time, so it's a bit of guesswork as to when exactly time will be called. In this case, cycloning was a mistake, but maybe the same scenario in the future will be different. Also, the difference in time rules between Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bit interesting and a little frustrating. In Magic, you get 5 turns from when time is called, not including the current turn, before a draw is called. I understand why that's not a great system for Yu-Gi-Oh! As turns can be much longer than in Magic, but the current system definitely creates more feels bad moments than it should do. The kicker for me is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Rounds are already shorter than other games despite the game itself being incredibly complex, so I find time comes up much more frequently than in other games. Concluding locals this week, we went 2-2 overall, and to be honest, the result might not be amazing, and I might feel a little burnt out by the time rules, but the gameplay itself was actually awesome. The round against Dragon Link was a bit of a wash, but the rounds against Subterra and DIS felt very back and forth, very grindly and reasonably close. The fact we managed to outgrind both Dragon Link last week and Dogmatica Invoke Shaddol this week, with both of those matches feeling incredibly close and just coming down to time, means that the build is working really well and it will only get better as I play faster and better. And now for something I ordered over a month ago. Up till now I've been playing with Netrunner playmats because that's just the playmats I've had. However, I really wanted one with zones, especially for remote dueling, because it's quite easy to accidentally end up with a 6th zone, which you may have noticed happened in this episode if you've kept your eyes peeled. And yeah, I really wanted one with zones and some artwork that's actually Yu-Gi-Oh! Related. So I thought back to the times I played the game as a kid, particularly around the early Synchro era, and I came across this mat that has the artwork of one of the most feared monsters of that era. And that monster is Black Rose Dragon. And damn, this mat is gorgeous in person. The zones are card size instead of sleeve size, which is unfortunate because most people that use a playmat are also going to be using sleeves, but the actual artwork itself is beautiful. I got this on Etsy, and if you can stomach most of the mats on Etsy, there's some pretty big gems down there, but this was definitely the one for me because Crossroads of Chaos and the sets just after it were the time where I was most invested into Yu-Gi-Oh! Looking up a lot of stuff on YouTube, just generally on the internet as that was becoming more of a thing. And yeah, I played plants back then, so during Crossroads of Chaos I played plants, and Black Rose Dragon was just the thing to fear. You overcommit to the board and it comes down, you get completely blown out. It was such a monster for its time, and this mat kind of just immortalizes that for me. So yeah, I'm going to be playing with this mat from now on in locals, and you'll probably see it in some upcoming videos. So something I've been feeling with the series is that there's not really a defined end state. There's no topping a regionals with a sealed only deck, or topping a YCS because those aren't currently happening, and they're also a little out of my reach for now. That said, I don't want the series to go on if it's not going to progress, so let's review where we're at. We have 2 budget decks with upgrade paths planned out for both with upcoming reprints. We're putting up great games against established players on top meta decks, and we fleshed out a trade binder with the cards from our collection. I've definitely dived right into Yu-Gi-Oh! So what's left for the series? Ultimately, what's left is the grind. I have to play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! To transition from knowing the rules and a couple decks to considering competing in something like a regional. And that means that the next bunch of episodes would just be weekly locals recaps until the reprints come out and I upgrade the decks. Ultimately, I don't feel like that offers enough value as an episodic series, so let's take a good part of the series, the locals recaps, and make them into a standalone series of date-based videos rather than an episodic series. This allows me to make those videos focus on specific topics, and keeps them focused and useful for someone finding them as a standalone video for a specific meta. I have noticed that this is also when episodes tend to perform better in terms of external discovery. This is proven by the Super Poly episode and the Super Budget Shaddolls episode. There's clearly demand for focused, topical discussion backed up by gameplay. And that's something I can provide, however, I would like to keep it focused and not bloated out by the episodic structure that I have created for this series. Another part of the series that I particularly liked was the focus on deck building. So let's turn that into a series of videos focused on deck building. Again, with this idea being that I really want to focus my videos. The episodes are fun to make, but they take a lot of time and they cover a lot of topics, and they've only really scratched the surface. If we have a focused series on deck builds, then it allows us to go into much more detail without worrying about making a video too long because it's also got gameplay in it. And ultimately, a series of my return to YuGiOh was always going to be a limited thing. There was only so long I could be a newcomer in the game, and I've gone from throwing Game 2 against non-existent Nibiru's to competing with the best decks of the format, and I've not busted my bank account to do it. So I've got no doubts in saying that I've successfully dived into YuGiOh, which means this series has reached its logical end. Are there still areas for me to improve at the game? Absolutely, but that's never going to not be the case. And as far as reintroduction to the game, the past 2 months have been exactly that. And I'd really like to thank everyone who's stuck through this series to the end. It's not been the longest series, and it's not been the largest, but it's been incredible fun, and I've learned a ton about YuGiOh and a ton about video editing through this time, and I now want to convert all of that into creating informational and useful videos for people to reference going forward. So, thank you once again for watching, and good luck, have fun.